Hello there, I'm Father Duke 9000, and today it's time to review Jet Set Radio for the Sega Dreamcast. Jet Set Radio was originally released for the Sega Dreamcast in 2000 and was one of the first games to use the incredibly underrated cel-shaded technique, a graphical style that rendered 3D graphics in a way that gave them a two-dimensional animated look and feel. The game eventually got a huge cult following due to the cel-shaded graphics, its fast-flowing gameplay, and especially its eclectic soundtrack, which to this day is considered by many to be one of the greatest soundtracks in gaming. While I never played the original due to not having a Dreamcast, I did play its utterly kick-ass sequel, Jet Set Radio Future, and now it's time to finally see how the original game stands out after all these years. However, I have heard in a few accounts that since Future played differently from the original, if I played Future first, then I might not like the original as much. So, let's just be a little bit cautious about things, shall we? Jet Set Radio is set in the near-futuristic city of Tokyo-to, which is essentially Tokyo, but the prefix to is added to the end of every district name for some demented reason. In Tokyo-to, there's a huge thing going on right now where gangs of rollerbladers spray graffiti throughout the city streets while fighting off the police. Jet Set Radio follows the trials and tribulations of newly set up gang the GGs as they attempt to become the top graffiti gang in the city. However, as time passes, they may have to go through much more than that. Jet Set Radio is a hybrid of a 3D platformer and an extreme sports style, where the goal is to spray graffiti on areas marked with a red arrow as fast as possible. The A button jumps, you speed up while on the ground by holding onto the right trigger, center the camera behind your back by pressing the left trigger, and when near marked graffiti areas, you can start spraying graffiti by pressing the left trigger and completing context-sensitive motions on the larger pieces. In each level, you're given a set number of spots to tag in a certain amount of time, which are marked with mandatory red arrows and optional green arrows. In order to spray graffiti, you need graffiti cans, which luckily are located on most grinding rails in two different varieties. Yellow, which counts as 1 can, and blue, which counts as 5 cans. In total, there are 3 city districts, each with 4 levels. On the first time through, you tackle each level separately, but when you conquer a district, you can play through all 4 levels at once, as they're actually connected via a series of different routes. Occasionally, in between missions, a rival will challenge you to beat them at a certain task, such as copying their moves, beating them in a race to a graffiti spot, and more. When you defeat them, you can now play as that rival if you want. Something else to note is that the more graffiti spots you tag in a level, the more police and SWAT show up to try and stop you by either clinging onto you in order to slow you down, or they just shoot missiles at you, because, well, why the hell not? Now, while this game does have a large cult following, that doesn't mean the game has no problems. Firstly, there are some mandatory graffiti spots that are very difficult to reach and can result in failing over and over when trying to reach them, which is really annoying. Probably the worst level with this example is the second level that appears in the second chapter of the game, which involves many tall buildings and falling off them over and over and over and over again. And speaking of large levels, it's actually quite easy to get lost and not know where you're supposed to go. Yes, I know there's a mission map in the pause menu, but wouldn't it have made more sense to have a mini-map or heck even a compass to show the nearest tag spot? Also, some of the rival races are pretty irritating as you have to race all across the district just to get to one spot, and graffiti cans just seem to vanish during these challenges, meaning you could get there first and still lose because you couldn't find any graffiti cans while taking the fastest route. Now, there's a very particular aspect of the game that I'm very split upon, and that's its soundtrack. Now, I know it has a lot of fans, but to me, half of it is made up of some of the most repetitive, annoying stuff that will drill its way into your head and stay there for hours on end, refusing to leave, while the other half is actually made up of pretty good music that fits the style of the game very well. The reason I'm split on this is partially due to the way that the music is played out in the game. What I mean by this is that during levels, a randomly picked music track plays on a loop for a few minutes and can randomly change to a different song, but this doesn't always happen. What this means is that you could spend 10 minutes in one level listening to a really annoying repetitive track, and spend that same amount of time in another level listening to 4 or 5 tracks that change very quickly. To sum it up, some of the music is pretty good, while other parts of it are among the most annoying things you will ever be forced to listen to in any form of media. Heck, but even despite all that, I actually quite like Jet Set Radio. Firstly, its cel-shaded graphics are still very nice 12 years after the game originally came out, as it gives the game a very distinct look and is actually quite colorful. I'll admit that the character models kind of look like origami, but the colorful cel shading more than makes up for that. Some of the levels are also nicely designed, and there's a good variety of style and design. Some levels are bright, neon-filled playgrounds of rollerblading fun, while others have a more somber platforming feel to them, and it's easy to tell one district from another. And while there are a few annoying songs, as I've admitted earlier, there are also quite a few very nice songs that fit the mood of the game perfectly well, and it was awesome that this particular port even featured tracks from Jet Set Radio Future. Although sadly you can't listen to them while playing the game, you can only listen to them in the menu they're featured in, which is really frigging annoying. However, the best part of the game to me has to be its gameplay. To put it simply, it is just pure, utter fun with no distractions. It is just so satisfying to get a high trick combo from grinding, jumping, and using whatever tricks there are in the game to get the best possible score. The gameplay is very fun, it's fast-paced, and best of all for an extreme sports game, is accessible to people who know nothing of the sport. Short and simply, the gameplay is nothing more than an absolute joy to play through. Jet Set Radio is a pretty damn good game with very nice graphics, some pretty good and some very good music, well designed in varied levels, and utterly brilliant gameplay. However, it's severely let down by difficult spots in some stages, irritating rival races, being unhelpful at times, and some of the most annoying music on the planet. Overall, I give Jet Set Radio a rating of damn solid. A pretty damn good game with a few very good or heck even brilliant aspects, and some really flipping awful ones.
Let's get scratched.